Yeah, folks, Mark Johnson here, back with another review. I'm excited about this one, really simply for the fact that this is the iPad Pro. Now, this is the 2021 model. I've been using it, honestly, since it launched, and I've got a lot of mixed feelings on it, okay? I'll be honest with you. I've probably recorded a review for this a few different times, and I just kind of went back to the drawing board because I want to give you three things I really think this iPad can really, three categories it kind of falls into in my opinion. So let's talk about the first one, and that is if you're using this for entertainment. Okay, so if you're using this iPad for entertainment, I mean, the first thing you're going to see is this huge, beautiful display. It's got this micro LED panel. It gets very bright. The screen, it gets very dark. Reminds me just like OLED, to be honest with you. And it's honestly, it's the best screen I've seen on an iPad. I mean, it's just that good. You know, there's a lot of hype around it. It's one of those things, to be honest, if you don't have an old iPad right next to it, you may say, hey, it looks just as good as before. And that's not a bad thing because Apple's always had good screens. The second thing is when you're thinking about watching movies and the sound and you're talking about YouTube, all that stuff is great. The screen is very fast, 120 hertz display, ProMotion. So that's good as well. Now, the next use case I'm going to talk about is using this for work. Now, this is where things start to get very iffy for me because, to be honest with you, I do a lot of work. I work in the IT field, do a lot of stuff with solution architecture, and I do things like draw reference architectures, diagrams. I do some work with your Outlook, your Teams, Google Meet, all those good applications from a productivity standpoint, and they all work relatively well. I mean, you can really use any of those apps, Zoom, drawing, Teams, all that stuff works really well on here. But it's still, in my opinion, it just doesn't, it can't match the desktop just because of the way you do multitasking. It's still a little pain on here in the sense where you got a split screen and you got all these crazy gestures you need to do to be able to make it happen. However, in the newer iOS 15 beta, they've made that a lot easier, which is kudos to Apple. I'll give them credit for that. But ultimately, these applications, if you're a power user, if you like to have several windows open at once, if you're jumping in between different items and things like that, this isn't going to be for you. Okay, it's just not. I mean, you're gonna spend more time trying to figure out how to do it, and by the time you figure that, you may just go back to your old machine or your current laptop or desktop and wherever you may be using. And then this third use case, you can say third or fourth, just depending on how you look at it, is more about creating content, right? So if you're thinking about if you're doing video editing, if you're doing drawing, if you're doing any type of work like that where you're being creative, actually this iPad really is nice for that because, drawing, I have the second gen Apple Pencil. Those of you that already know, you could stick it right here on the top and it's magnetic. And then it also starts charging the screen at the same time. So you'll actually see a little animation when I put it at the top. You also can, it's very, very, as close as you can get, I'd say, replicating like drawing pen and pad, as far as drawing on the screen. So works very well. And then for video editing, if you use something like LumaFusion, I have used it. I got the full version. It's very, very comparable to something like a Final Cut Pro. Once again, there's a learning curve, as with any of these apps, just because you're using an iPad, right? And there's extra gestures and there's all this other, the learning curve can be a little tricky. I'm not gonna lie. With that being said, kind of wrapping up these three use cases, if you get the keyboard, which is nice, the Magic Keyboard, and there's several third-party options out there by Logitech and there's just, you go to Apple Store or whatever may have, there's the Bridge keyboard. Several nice keyboards out there. It actually does take this to a different level, but it also takes us to a different price, right? Because this iPad here, this is the 1 terabyte. It's got 16 gig of RAM. It's got 5G on there. I didn't bring up 5G because, unless you're doing a lot of traveling and 5G, I haven't even enabled it, to be honest. I just haven't had the need to. But I will at some point when I get back to doing some more, travel for work. But with that being said, I think that the price, right? This particular model, I believe, as of this date, I think it's $199. So I think it's $2,000 for this. And then the keyboard is another $350. So, when you add up all, the price here, like, if you don't have another machine, and that's what I'm kind of going to give you standpoint from, if you have a laptop or a desktop, and maybe you're thinking of, instead of upgrading it, you want to go all iPad, or maybe you have an existing one and you just want to add this on as a third device, or secondary, I think that it works best in that scenario. It, like, completely by itself, if you're used to doing a lot of productivity, or even if you're doing, even some of the creative stuff could be a little bit more of a hassle because you're dependent on apps from the App Store and, updates and all that good stuff, and just interface, just using it. It could be a challenge. So yeah, when I'm on the Apple site now. So if I go to Wi-Fi, cellular, yeah, so it's $2,000, and then you throw in this keyboard, it's $350, and then you throw the pencil in, it's another, $120 or so, $129. So like you're getting, I mean, you can have a gaming laptop, you could have an M1 MacBook Air, and maybe a lower end iPad. So it's a lot of room there in that price. I mean, it's a pretty huge price point. But I will say it's awesome though. Like, I mean, if you don't mind paying it, you're gonna get a fantastic iPad, and you won't forget that's what you're using. Simply for the fact that I just think that Apple's gonna keep these devices very, very specific in that segment. I don't think it's ever going to be designed to completely replace your MacBook Air, M1 MacBook Air, specifically because you can get an M1 MacBook Air now. I've seen them for $750, right? So you could literally buy three, and I have it right here. You could buy 3 M1 MacBook Airs for the price of this iPad. Now, the iPad's more fun to use. It's got better speakers. It's got FaceTime. It's got 5G. It's got this cool camera that pans around from a widescreen, from a front facial camera. So it's got a whole bunch of cool things. I'm not gonna lie, from a tech perspective, the iPad blows it away just from a feature perspective, because you can't even get a touchscreen on a MacBook Air. But I will say, when you get down to it, like, hey, if you don't have if this isn't just like a splurge purchase and you just want to use it to be your daily driver for everything, go for it. I say try it out, but just beware that it's a huge learning curve. And to be honest, I don't think you're going to get much things done a lot faster than you could just using a normal laptop. So hopefully that helps. Like I said, hey, if you're in the iOS apps, if you're using the iPadOS apps, all that stuff is great. If that's primarily what you're using it for, this is going to be a great device. But honestly, like I said, it's good for screen sharing. It's good for a lot of tertiary type of things, but as my main thing, nope, not for me. So hopefully you liked this video. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Take care.